Hey everybody, John the Other here. Obviously. Now you're wondering why I'm holding this up. I'm doing a response video to RazorBladeKandy. Now he did a video, like a really long video, addressing me and Diana Davison at Voice for Man, Paul Elam, and Judgy Bitch. So I'm going to respond, but only to the parts of his video that address me, because ego, right? And I'll start with the beginning. I made notes, which I'm referring to here, just so I don't miss anything. RazorBladeKandy begins by saying, so John was banned from AVFM, and now he doesn't like them, and they suck. That's not too simplistic, is it? No. It's perfect. RBK, RazorBladeKandy, also points out that A Voice for Men has gone through a lot of people who he says are all disgruntled. I don't know if they're all disgruntled. Maybe some of them are. Now, a lot of people are going to say, yes, you're disgruntled. Well, I disagree with some of the policies, but the reality is that I am no longer required to police my tone or consider other people's hurt feelings or sensitivities. I can just say what I want to say, and I don't have like an editorial board buzzing in my ear saying you can't say that or you can't say those words and stuff like that. So for me, although being fired was sort of a little upsetting, now I basically have much more freedom to speak my mind and not really worry about who gets excited about it. Anyway, at about 5 minutes into RazorBladeKandy's video, he goes on a little bit of a rant about how feminism is in its death throes, which, by the way, I think is correct. But RazorBladeKandy makes the logical leap that because feminism isn't completely dead yet, we should not focus our attention on opposing the gynocentric traditionalism which is creeping into the movement. That is not actually a correct assessment of my position. I can see, though, how he might have got that impression. I'm happy to clear it up here. I know that right now the fight is to oppose traditional gynocentrism because it is likely going to sweep in and completely subvert the non-MGTOW sector of the men's rights movement. RBK, RazorBladeKandy, also at the 12-minute mark, notes that some of the time, AVFM, where I used to work, seems like a bunch of, he says, pretentious fools sipping wine, wearing monocles, and listening to Mozart, while at other times they seem to be clowns throwing pies at one another, and that I fit into that picture perfectly because, in his words, I am a seriously goofy fucker. Thank you for noticing. Next, at about 13.5 minutes, RazorBladeKandy notes my objections to an article written by somebody claiming to be a female-to-male transsexual. RBK apparently had similar concerns, but he goes farther, suggesting that the policy of putting women up front is a cynical attempt to say, how can you say I hate all women when all my frontmen are women? Now, I think there's probably an element of truth in this, although it's not quite as simple as just, hey, some of my best friends are black when you're accused of racism. There is a social reality at play that when you're attempting to make an argument or construct language that will be persuasive, having your message delivered by a woman makes your audience about 10,000 times more receptive. In fact, having women on your team is a powerful protection against violence or threats of violence from the social justice warrior type. If you're in a situation where you might be physically assaulted, the likelihood of that assault happening is almost completely eliminated when you have a woman on your team standing next to you. The problem comes when female MRAs depart from the mission of men's rights and begin to introduce their own self-interested gynocentrism into the project. Even if somebody in a men's rights organization is there to keep the gynocentrism in check, other less self-aware MRAs will instinctively white knight on behalf of that woman who is bringing the gynocentrism in, and the guy who rejects that gynocentrism will almost certainly be brigaded by his MRA colleagues. And here's the kicker, they won't even be able to see that what they've done is gynocentric. The Kool-Aid really is that powerful. But RazorBladeKandy also points out that my persona, that of this, John the Other character, is a circus act. He compares me to Ace Frehley and Keith Moon being a sometimes amusing, pompous, pretentious ass, filming myself in high contrast black and white, putting on sound effects, and so on. I'm just glad that all the effort I make isn't being wasted. And thank you, RazorBladeKandy, for noticing. But I do take your point.
This is a much better style. Moving on to Stefan Molyneux. He was obviously one of the higher profile speakers at AVFM's conference, and at that time, I had been fired, but not yet banned by Paul, so as much as I was ticked off by being fired, I had tried to quit prior to that, and was making an effort to not let personal emotion drive me into foolish and pointless retaliation. I will also note that I was a fan of Molyneux, not so much his multi-hour long call-in shows, but his shorter, topic-specific monologues. Regardless of what anybody, including me now, thinks about Molyneux as a person, he does say some things I still agree with. So when I saw his Truth About Himself video, it shocked the hell out of me. How could this guy who so prided himself on universality of standards turn around and spout a torrent of insane NYTHO poetic gibberish? In fact, I could imagine anybody momentarily carried away with themselves in a moment of manic ego saying that kind of thing, but Molyneux then edited it into a video and uploaded it, saying effectively, yes, that wasn't just me having an egogasm, but I'm going to stand behind this and make it part of my narrative. I'm the Messiah. Woohoo. So, before I wrote my Stefan Molyneux article, I relayed a message to Paul through AVFM's editorial board, asking if they wanted input on a criticism of Molyneux. I knew it was going to be a sensitive topic, because Stefan had just spoken at the AVFM conference, and I had not, but I still though of Paul as a fellow MRA, so I thought I should get his input on any criticism I had of Molyneux's insane rant about himself. I was prepared to have them heavily tone police me, or possibly have them talk me out of voicing any criticism. I was not living inside their bubble anymore, so I didn't expect them to completely lose their shit. I still trusted Paul up to that point. I know, you can call me naive. I won't say you're wrong. But at the time of my asking for feedback on the Molyneux issue, I hadn't yet written the article. What I got back by way of response was an offline Skype message from Paul, in which he completely flamed me. And that did piss me off a little bit. So, rather than writing a reasonably polite criticism of Molyneux's self-mythologization, I de-alled the politeness in my Molyneux article all the way up to the highest possible level of ass-kissing. And I kissed Molyneux's ass, not to appease Molyneux, but to personally mock Paul for his temper tantrum. Was this mature of me? No. Did Paul understand I was mocking his temper tantrum? I'm confident that he did. And I'm also glad that RBK gave me this opportunity to clarify that, for anybody who was wondering. But RBK also called me a latent French homosexual. This is too disgusting of an insult to tolerate. I am not French. RBK also mentions Register Her, and that he believes it was Paul's project. He's also pretty much against it. But it wasn't Paul, that was me. Obviously, Paul benefited from it, because I was working with him, and with AVFM at the time, and he also had significant input, but I was the lead on Register Her. That was mine, and since my firing, it's mine again, although presently not an active site. I own the domain. I will reactivate it with the second version of the Register Her project as my time and resources permit. The first version of Register Her was a parallel of the court and government-maintained registries of men, where in many cases, men who have committed no actual crime are rendered unemployable, and subject to a potential for spontaneous, citizen-initiated violence for the rest of their lives. Register Her was primarily a listing of criminals, collected from mainstream media reporting. By criminals, I mean women who had killed children, who had issued fraudulent rape accusations for personal gain, who had committed aggravated assault, and so on. Almost nobody understood the comparison being made, and viewed the Register Her project as nothing except a terror weapon. Likely because we also included a couple of high-profile feminists on the site. But nobody got it. They focused only on the feminists and seemed unaware that the majority of the registrants were people with criminal convictions, pulled from pre-existing mainstream reporting. I guess you can't cure stupid. The to-be-revived Register Her project has the intent of documenting the legal activism of people like Elizabeth Cheahy, Lenore Walker, and Fred Shane. As for Femitheist, yes, I published her name, and excerpts of her writing. RBK is correct to that extent. Where he is incorrect is in identifying my motive. RBK's theory is that it was in retaliation for her apparent harassment of me. I am not aware that she has ever harassed me. She did name me on her blog at one point, listing me as one of her top 3 enemies. I didn't feel harassed by that, I was quite pleased. I got her full name from public court records on the internet detailing her arrest for drunken and disorderly conduct, meaning she was already doxed. But I did publish her name, and my motive was because she repeatedly advocated mass murder and mutilation. If somebody in my field of attention calls for or advocates murder or significant violence, I will publish their name. Terms of service? Fuck the terms of service. If somebody promotes murder or violence in my field of vision, and I'll dig up who they are and publish it. I've been banned from various forums and sites for this policy, and I don't care. I don't care if I'm arrested for doing it. Promote or call for murder, I will dox you with a smile on my face. A really cool looking black and white smile. And when I laugh, there will be reverb. RBK also gets it wrong when mentioning I stated I would withdraw or remove anything I've said about Femitheist based on her compliance with some edict or other. I have never made such an offer, and anybody believing I would unpublish something based on compliance with a suggestion of mine is suffering from misunderstanding. RBK next asks how I am different from a feminist who calls somebody's employer, accusing them of being a member of a hate movement. My first answer to this, the somewhat common comparison of me to a feminist, with the possible motive of shaming me, is to toss off the rhetorical question of, who cares? RBK does not think I'm a feminist, and does not think I am using a feminist tactic. To me, however, the comparison reads like an attempt to tone police. But I will answer the question, how am I different from a feminist? To begin, I am not calling for murder, nor for any other form of violence. Additionally, I am not promoting or facilitating any violence, not even against the murder enthusiast Femitheist blonde little cutie Krista. She is in no danger whatsoever from any pro-male, MRA, anti-feminist or anyone else. She has the immunity idol of being a cute, blonde mutinous object of everybody's desire. In my so-called doxing, I am also not labeling her other than as commentary. What I'm doing is attaching her name to her actions, those actions being advocating mass murder. It's not a form of censorship, since it is not a form of silencing. You might be slightly more accurate to call it harassment, but I call it accountability. Now, it's not a mystery what would happen to any MRA or MGTOW with a significant platform who advocated the mass slaughter of women. Anybody who has any doubts about that, raise your hand. Please put your hand down. If a man went on the internet and seriously promoted an intention to murder large numbers of women, he would be in jail in less than 24 hours. But when a woman does exactly that, with men being the intended target for mass murder, there is no significant consequence. There might be a little pushback from idealists, bloggers and other cranks, like you, or me, but there will certainly be no serious official consequence, like a prison term. And obviously, neither Krista, nor Pam O'Shaughnessy, nor any other of these sociopaths have the resources to organize or execute their fantasy killings, but it is by the repetition of such murder advocacy that such ideas gain currency in society. 10 years ago, if you predicted that a professor of law could publish a book advocating women killing their partners, and providing a set of legal strategies to get away with it legally, that prediction would have been laughed out of the room. Now we have exactly that from our friend in Ottawa, Elizabeth Sheehy. Here's an outlandish scenario. Promoting MGTOW is decided by a feminist Supreme Court judge to be a form of domestic violence. Couple that with the already existent fact that in Canada, women not even subjected to domestic violence, but merely claiming to have been victimized, can use that claim as a method of reducing or eliminating their legal culpability in murder. The murder victim doesn't even have to be the same person who they claim abused them. So, in the scenario I have outlined, if you promote MGTOW, you can now be legally killed by your girlfriend. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? That's how absurd a law professor publishing a book advocating murder sounded to me less than a year ago. And in case you wonder, she was not pilloried by the media. She was treated as a revered expert. So how do we get to a world where your death at the hands of a disgruntled girlfriend is seen as legal, normal, and no big deal? Simple. Repetition of the feminist male slaughter fantasy. So if somebody advocates murder and other mass violence, now her name's attached. Enjoy. It's the very least I can do. But if you want to condemn it, fine, but at least call it what it is. It's not censorship. Now, I'm aware that on the internet, there's a culture of respecting the anonymity of commentators and vloggers and so on. I also know that the polite culture of respecting people's anonymity is what emboldens a lot of people to speak, who otherwise we would never hear from, and we want to hear from them. So do I. It's a big no-no to out somebody's identity. But it's also a big no-no for men to stand up in defense of their own humanity, or to seriously object to a cute little blonde who bats her big Disney eyes while advocating large-scale violence. So fuck the terms of service, and fuck the culture of respect for the privacy of murder advocates. I have my own terms of service, and the JTO EULA says whoever calls for violence, JTO will dox you. Now, I don't want to pretend I'm Judge Dredd, shouting I am the law. Seriously, that's not the position I'm taking. But the actual law does not prevent or address the continued advocacy by public figures, for you and me to be killed with no legal consequence to our killers. So, maybe we need to, in some measures, decide that we are the maintainers of our own law. I am not talking about vigilante justice here, at all. I have no patience or tolerance for any form of violence, proxy or otherwise. I'm talking about the fact that right now, there is a disconnect allowing the promotion of your and my murders, because there is no political will to address that, and there is also no social accountability, because we think the anonymity of a bimbo calling for our death needs to be protected. I have been doxed about a dozen times. Some of those also included my home address. One attempt to dox me sent violence-enthused social justice warriors to the home of one of my parents, a 70-year-old with no idea that their son was the Antichrist. Nobody seemed to mind each time I was doxed. I'm male, right? So fuck me, and fuck my 70-year-old relative who took the brunt of one of those attempts to harass me. So I say fuck the feminist anonymity. I see no serious difference between publishing the name of the femitheist who advocated the mass murder of men, from the activity I'm currently pursuing, which addresses Professor Elizabeth Sheehy, who is teaching law to university students, and succeeding in large part in advancing the feminist goal of legalizing female-committed spousal murder. And if you wonder, yes, I want Sheehy fired from her job, and barred from practicing law. It's clear she holds the law in contempt. Let her write books and give interviews for a living. I don't think you're going to complain about my intentions, and ongoing efforts to expose Sheehy. How is femitheist different? I assert that she is not. They are both public figures. They are both working to advance the goal of legalizing the killing of men. That's all. The rest of RBK's video address other issues. I'd like to thank RBK for providing me a reason to respond, and hopefully clarify my position for people who had a mistaken impression.
Thanks everybody for watching. Obviously have a lovely day, and I just want RBK to know I really take your criticisms and your advice very seriously.